Okay.
But you don't want extra blood vessels growing in your tumor, right?
Okay, good point.
So I think that with an abundance of caution, anyone who has a tumor, don't take these things.
Okay.
But it's not going to necessarily grow a tumor if you don't have one already.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's talk. By the way, thank you. Are you having as much fun doing this as I am? Because you know all this stuff already.
Well, this is one of the best interviews I've done because we're getting into all sorts of things that I usually don't get asked about.
Wonderful. Let's talk about aging for a second. So as we're measuring aging, I've read some things. So understanding what's happening, could you explain to us? Is it the cell's inability to now read the DNA like it used to, or what's happening that's causing this to happen in our body, and is what I just said completely ridiculous?
No, it's correct.
Good.
We're done. We're done here. Ed's going to do the rest of the interview by himself. No, it's seriously, you summed it up probably better than I could, which is, the analogy I use is a DVD. These old things you used to put movies on. Any kids watching or listening, these are old things you used to put digital information on, but they're a good analogy because you can actually scratch them.
Okay.
Right? And so a DVD is the digital information, and our genome, our DNA, is digital. Instead of zeros and ones, it's A, T, C, G chemicals. That information is actually very robust. You can get it out of an old person, it's intact mostly. You can get it out of a fossil. It lasts for thousands, if not millions of years. That's the cool thing about digital information. It lasts. There's another type of information that controls the reading of those genes. We call that not the genetic, but the epigenetic information. And epigenetic basically says, how is the DNA organized so a cell reads the right genes at the right time? And we don't know as much about it because it's much harder to read the epigenome than the genome. The reason is the epigenome is not digital information, it's actually analog. It sucks. Anyone who's had a cassette tape or a phonograph or a record player is actually experiencing the problems with analog information. There's generations of people now that have never experienced analog in their lives. But trust me, analog sucks. And our bodies, half of the information in our bodies is analog. And that's the problem. That's why we age. Because we have an analog system that reads the DNA. And over time, it doesn't read the right genes at the right time anymore. And cells, when they don't read the right genes, they don't function well. So our blood glucose goes up, we get weak, we get diseases. That's aging. But also, what happens is that the cells forget what type of cells they are. They despecialize. We call it X-differentiation. Essentially, we become a melange, a collection of cells that have forgotten what kind of cells they should be.
Got you.
And that is pretty bad news, right?
Yes.
If you scratch a DVD, you're in trouble. We've been looking for the polish on that DVD, and I think we found it.
And it is?
Well, we call it reprogramming, genetic or epigenetic reprogramming. And it's a set of genes that we can put into cells or into the eye of a mouse and reset the age of that animal. Remember that clock that we're going to measure on you? We call that the epigenetic clock for a good reason, because it's actually the analog changes in the cell. Right? But here's what we can do. We can actually tell the cell, now that you're old and you're not reading the right genes, go back and read the genes the way you should. It's essentially polishing the DVD. Another way to think of it is we're rebooting the cell. We've got corrupted software. Screw that. Let's restart the whole computer. And you're young again. Right? Erase the hard drive, start again. But we didn't know that was possible until a year ago. That's what's in the book. I was writing the book as we made these discoveries. Imagine that. There's a memory of being young in all of our bodies that we just have to tell reset.
Oh my gosh. And so do you mind naming the company that you're involved with that I was reading about that had something to do with the retina, or you're working on it specific with eyes, is that not right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's still in stealth mode.
This is incredible.
But I'll reveal it to all your listeners for the first time. It's called Iduna, and it's interesting. The first part of it is eye, because we're going to treat glaucoma.
Oh my gosh, this is huge.
And then Iduna is also the Norse goddess of longevity. But here's what we want to do. And I'm an entrepreneur just like you, because I believe not just in making discoveries, but making them practical for people. Iduna is planning and working towards treating the loss of vision in people.
This is unbelievable.
But if we can reverse aging in the eye, what can't we reverse aging in? So it's early days, but what we've just discovered, and we have a scientific paper, if you Google my name, you'll find it.
Okay.
We were able to reprogram the retina of an old mouse that couldn't see very well anymore to be young again. So the nerves in the back of the eye, they became young, and these mice completely got their vision back.
This is unbelievable. This is one of the, this may be one of the most exciting things that we're on the brink of, that you're at the forefront of on the planet right now. And the reason it's important to me, it's funny, as I've aged, I had perfect vision, as a baseball player, unreal vision. I could read a street sign from miles away. People, I don't know if it's miles away, but far away. People say, how do you see like this? And now I'm finding I can't read the street sign from 30 feet away. This area where I'm most aware of my aging is in my ability to see. And I have a sister, I haven't told you this, who was juvenile diabetes, born without a pancreas that functioned. And she's gotten to the point where essentially in long stages of her life she's been completely blind and now sees just to some extent. And so do you think that there's even properties eventually with people with massive retina deterioration you believe is going to be something that could be reversible at some point?
So I don't want to overpromise, because
Sure.
it's just a year old and we're making discoveries pretty fast, but it's still in animals. But let's just suspend all sorts of disbelief right now and talk about what's possible. So what I can tell you is the reason that you and I are losing our vision, the reason we have to do this at night, is because the nerves in the back of our eye are not youthful anymore, and they're forgetting that they're nerves.
Right, as we said earlier, yes.
And if I reprogram your eye just with an injection, what I think would happen is that you'd get, those nerves would say, oh shit, I got to work well again. That I think we can do. Our nerves in our eye are no different than a mouse's eye, really.
Okay.
But we did another experiment. We crushed the back of the optic nerve. We really, like you crush your spine, it's not going to grow back unless you're a baby. We reversed the age of those nerves so much that they actually started growing back to the brain even after we killed them.
Oh my gosh.
We crushed them.
Oh my gosh.
So
if you can do that in an eye, as you said, where else could that eventually be applicable in the body? You guys, unbelievable. Now we're not talking a decade. Now we're talking, we could potentially talking people living extremely long lifespans. What's doxycycline?
Doxycycline is an antibiotic that you take for Lyme disease and some other infections. It's pretty common.
What's the application here?
Well, so we engineered our treatment so that we put the genes in the eye.
Yes.
And then we give the mice doxycycline for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And that turns on the genes.
Okay.
They get their vision back. Then we turn it off again by taking away the antibiotic.
Got it.
So here's a future scenario.
Wow.
We can put those genes into our whole body. And as we get older, or God forbid, we break our back, or we injure ourselves, and we're not going to survive, we get an IV of doxycycline, or we take a pill, and we become like Deadpool, and we can regrow things, like an axolotl would chop their limb off and they grow again.
Oh my God.
And then we stop taking the antibiotic, we're young, and then we can wait another few decades.
Right, do it again.
Right. So here's the cool thing. And I'm going to mention this in my social media because we don't know the answer yet, but I'll keep you updated. I'll give you a call. We don't know.
Back on.
We don't. I'd love to come back on. We don't know how many times you can press the reset button and restore the hard drive. It could be once. We've done that. Maybe it's 100 times.
Oh my gosh. I'm such I'm not a skeptic. I think sometimes my mind goes to what's the problem with that, and I think about, there's only enough food in the world if people are living 200 and 300 and 400 years long. Have you thought through some of those issues? That's something you don't even think about.
No, I think about it all the time.
You do?
Yeah, because it's the planet and humanity that I care
Water
about.
and food, right? There's a finite amount of that, at least right now.
Well, so I talk about this in my book also, because we can't just solve aging and make people live a decade or more longer without tackling the other problems we have. But what I've done is the calculations and the rationale comes out that this is the best thing we can do for the planet. Now, it sounds crazy, right? That if we have people living longer, how's that going to help? Well, first of all, it doesn't raise the population that much. In fact, most countries are leveling off anyway. Okay. Even if we stopped aging today, the rate of population growth isn't that much. There aren't that many old people that are dying, actually. It's actually less than the rate of immigration right now. Yep. And there are a lot of countries that need help. Japan is losing its population, Europe as well. So there's that. But talk about consumption. We throw away half our food in this country. We've got to fix that first.
Sure.
Right? But the biggest thing, the big takeaway message is if we can keep people healthier for longer and just have them die in a matter of months at the end, which is what happens if you live to 100.
I understand now. Okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
So centenarians, we call them, people who make it over 100, they die quickly, usually of a heart attack or a kidney failure. They cost at least 1/3 less than the rest of us.
I get it.
Let's get us out there.
I just got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's trillions of dollars saving. We already waste a lot of money on healthcare,
Yeah.
keeping people alive for 10 years in nursing homes. I think we all have a duty to keep ourselves healthy for longer, if not for ourselves, but for our children and our grandkids who have to take care of us for 10 years.
This is a revolutionary conversation for me. It's a paradigm shifting conversation because some of the things we discussed today, everyone want to go back. You have to get this book. You have to get this book. You have to be following this man on social media, and you're going to want to get the next one. This is someone that if you want to live better, longer, healthier, you want to stay close to this man because obviously he's going to live for a whole long time. And he's at the cutting edge of all of these things we've talked about. I want people to dream for a minute, then I'm going to go for a question about, I don't have a lot of money, and I want to begin to live longer. But I want to go to one more thing, just because I want people to understand some of the possibilities that are out there. Talk to them about CRISPR just a little bit, because this is, combined with what you just described, something that is, you begin to think through all of the technological advances in the world. But in terms of this space, we may be entering the, if we want to call it the internet age of anti-aging right now. We may be sitting on the Apples and the Microsoft concepts, the Googles of anti-aging right now in some of these spaces. And these will change people's lives. So tell them about CRISPR just for a second.
Yeah,
if you
right.
would.
So we've gone through what we can do today in our daily lives.
Right.
And there's cutting edge technology that I talk about in my book, and we just talked about, that's coming very soon.
Yes.
And there's medicines already that you can possibly take. But the future looks incredible. I've already said that even if we don't have these breakthroughs, every 4 years we get to live longer, we get another year of life. That's great. But what's coming makes my head spin. And I've been at the cutting edge of genetics for the last 30 years. And I just can't believe, every morning I wake up and I pinch myself that we're living in the future already. But what's coming blows my mind. So in my department at Harvard Medical School, I get to work with people who grow eyes in a dish and people who work on all sorts of futuristic stuff, growing brains in a dish. George Church is one of my good friends and colleagues. My lab's just on the different floor than his in the same building. So he's one of the guys that, women as well, there are a team of people that showed that you could actually edit the human genome.
This is huge.
So we can now read the genome. Instead of $1 billion to read your genome, I can do it in my lab for a device that big
Right now.
for $100.
Right.
I can do that today.
Yes.
And soon it'll be in a few hours for less than the cost of a needle.
Crazy.
That's the crazy stuff. But it gets even crazier when we can actually change the genome. We don't just read it, we write it. And we can change genes, we can put new genes in very easily. There are drugs on the market. Most people may not realize that we can now, the FDA approved drugs, we are changing people's genetic diseases. We're curing genetic diseases. Yes. We are living in the future, man.
It's crazy.
But the future for us is going to be even crazier because we are just on the cusp of hundreds of companies working on CRISPR and gene therapy. And this is the hottest thing in biotech right now.
I mean, imagine the ability to interrupt the fact that you have a predisposition to heart disease or a form of cancer and interrupt that. How about this? Maybe this is nuts. Could we potentially interrupt somebody's and make them smarter? Could you change someone's intelligence through altering their genome? Could you do that?
Well, theoretically. There's a lot of genes involved in intelligence, and the brain has to be wired from an early age.
Okay.
But we know that drugs are capable of making you more intelligent, or at least give you more creativity. So we could do that, theoretically. But one of the things I'm excited about is being able to alter our bodies in ways that make us resistant to certain diseases.
Okay.
Heart disease, HIV. Now, we can get to that.
Go ahead.
There are 2 kids on this planet that were genetically modified to be resistant to HIV. That's craziness. Now, crazy to think about. Now, there's a whole debate. We in the world should start debating whether we want to not just help ourselves, but we want to make our kids resistant to heart disease, to cancer. We know how to do this. If you said, David, could I make my kids resistant to cancer? That's easy. I could do that in my lab. One of my students could do it. It's not difficult. We know that there are species that live a lot longer than us. They have certain gene variants. They have special types of these longevity genes. Whales can live 200 years. We know pretty much what they're doing. They're stabilizing their epigenome. Their DVDs don't get scratched as much. So whales can live 200 years. So it's possible. We know some of the genes that are involved. We could give ourselves that, or we could give our children that.
Why would we not? What are the negative implications of something like that?
Well, we just want to make sure it's safe. I think that's the main
what
one.
else is it doing? Is that what you mean?
Right. You could make them intelligent, but they might then get cancer the next
I got
week.
you. So I want to make sure I pronounce it right. Senolytics. Am I saying that correctly?
Senolytics?
Yes.
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, they're exciting too.
Okay.
That's also been a breakthrough. So as I mentioned that before we figured out how to reprogram the body, the best technology and understanding we had were these hallmarks of aging. There are about 8 of these. And I mentioned some of them.
Yeah.
One of the main ones is senescent cells, which accumulate.
Right. Okay.
Right. So when you get a really bad scratch DVD, when your cells forget what type of cell they are, they can kill themselves, but if they don't kill themselves, they become senescent. So what's senescent? They actually, instead of dying, they just sit there like zombies.
Yes.
And that'd be fine, except they start to secrete these factors that cause other cells that are healthy to grow old and defective. Inflammation is a big problem.
Yeah.
And we think that senescent cells are causing this problem.
Okay.
So senolytics is just a word for drugs that will kill off those cells when they're not dying themselves.
Got it.
And in mice, if you do that, they get rejuvenated.
Okay.
And they get younger.
Okay. I'm thinking through someone listening to this, because the typical person in my audience, I think, works out to look better or eats to look better. And I think the next level of consciousness, particularly, unfortunately, I found that anti-aging has almost become a space and an area where people with some affluence have been thinking about more than people that are just trying to get through life and improve their stock in life, and I don't like that part of it.
Yeah.
And so I know there are people listening to this going, this sounds good, I can't afford to get metformin, I'm probably not going to take growth hormone, and I'm not sure that I should anyway. Resveratrol is relatively affordable for most people, you could probably get your hands on that potentially, but if you were to give me 2 or 3, 4 basic things I could do to begin to reverse the aging process for me, would be the caloric restriction, would it be carbohydrates?
Yeah.
What would those few things be if I'm not able to get myself a couple of these medications that I should be putting in my body right away?
Yeah, well, so I absolutely agree with you that we can talk about gene therapy for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is great if you're losing your vision, by the way, but these are not available to everybody.
Right.
And I just got back from Africa a few months ago, and believe me, there are people in this world that don't care about anti-aging.
Sure.
We also don't call it anti-aging where I come from, because anti-aging is a whole group of people who are working on other things. So we call it longevity research. But if there was one thing, you asked me, that I could give advice, or maybe a few things. The first would be eat less often. There are studies that are being done with my colleagues at the National Institute of Health. They gave mice, who have very similar metabolisms to us, very different diets. They wanted to know, is it better to eat more meat, or to eat more carbohydrate, or more fat?
Okay.
Big debate. And the result blew me away.
Okay.
He found that it wasn't better to eat more meat. He found it wasn't better to eat more fat, and it wasn't better to eat more carbohydrate.
Okay.
It wasn't what you ate. All those mice lived a normal lifespan.
How much you ate?
But
how
the
often?
ones that ate it in a small time of day, 2 hours a day, lived 20% longer.
Wow.
So here's the take-home message.
Wow.
If that's right, it's not so much what you eat, it's when you eat that's important.
Okay.
And so I've gone on a diet where I restrict when I eat. I try not to eat breakfast, try not to eat lunch. That has made me feel a lot better. I'm sharper, and I think that I'm going to live longer because of that.
Okay.
So that's step one.
Okay.
And in fact, that saves money.
Sure
Right.
does, right.
Right. And don't overindulge in anything. Don't just eat all meat, in my view. Don't eat all fat.
Okay.
You want to mix it up. Trick your body. Oh, I'm running out of this. I'm running out of that. And even with resveratrol, don't have to take it every day. Take it every other day. Tricks your body. Another thing that's cheap. Get off your ass.
Okay.
I typed a book, and I think I aged a lot writing this book, actually. But it was worth it. But if you don't get your body into a state of breathlessness, or get your muscles to be tired and sore, your body will say, hey, everything's good. I don't need to fight diseases. I don't need to fight aging.
Okay.
So you lose your breath at least a few times a week if you can.
Okay.
Get on a treadmill. I think 40 minutes is great. 10 minutes is good. But anything is better than nothing.
Okay.
What else is good? So what I do when I go to the gym on Sunday with my son,
You go once a week.
well, I try to go more,
Okay.
and I'm on planes a lot.
Yeah.
But I have a home gym, so I try to do a little
Okay.
bit. But I don't live a perfect life. It's maybe why I take extra molecules to try and supplement that.
Offset it.
Yeah. But
Can I tell you,
I finish work about midnight, so it's
you're in that mega achiever, multiple companies, your lab, all the work you do, children. You're at that point where, sometimes your fitness and your nutrition may take a back seat, right? Which is probably another thing. One thing you didn't mention that I'm surprised, and I've not heard you talk about this. We're all being happier. Yeah. So, and I know it's not part of the research necessarily, or maybe it is, but do happy people live longer?
They do. They always do.
Okay, so how come that's not part of what's talked about, or is it just so anecdotal or silly that it's not discussed? But I would think happier people have less stress in their body, probably less inflammation in their body, just by not having that kind of stress.
It's true. It's true. But one of the reasons we don't talk about it is that we don't understand why it works.
Okay. Because as a scientist, you have to be able to prove why it works. Okay.
Yeah. That's why people didn't regard aging as a disease, which I do. We didn't understand why aging happened, so we said, it's natural, let's not deal with that. But now, like cancer, we understand, we think how it works. You can focus on that. Now it's okay to say it's a problem. Happiness, wishy-washy. Okay. But all of the centenarians, the people that live to 100, they're always happy people.
That's right.
Right. Mind you, if I lived to 100, I'd be pretty happy too.
Right, no, there's a good point.
But they've been happy their whole life.
Yes.
And that's definitely works. But I haven't been happy my whole life. I'm a lot happier now that I'm 50, because I've learned what a bad day is, and most days are not bad days, even if you think they're bad. But early in my life, I was quite depressed, actually.
We talked a little bit that off camera, so let's just go there for a few seconds. I've told you that the thing that surprised me the most, and I just think it should, here's somebody who's, arguably the best person in the world in their field, is doing work that has tremendous meaning. I mean, I don't know that you could do work that has more meaning to mankind than what you're doing right now outside of spiritual work. Yet, you're not always happy. You haven't always been happy in your life. And I think it's important that people know, because I've told people that, on my show, the thing that surprised me the most, all these mega achievers, what do they all have in common? Some of it's work ethic, some of it's good fortune, some of it's intellect, but they don't all have those things. The vast majority struggle to some extent with a little bit of their mental health. Do you still? When I met you, when we just embraced when you first got here, I thought you had an ease and honestly, like an elegance about your personality. This is somebody very comfortable with themselves. But as I've started to watch you more, I wonder if there's this dude in there that's a little bit at battle with himself, that's wondering if he's not moving this at the speed that he should, if his work is not where he would like it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a perfectionist and an overachiever. I want to leave the world way better than I found it, at least somewhat better. And I find myself in a position of great responsibility. Now I'm at Harvard and I've got this research. So I'm maximizing my day without sacrificing my family as best I can. But early in my career, because I set such a high goal from an early age, ever since I was 4, I wanted to understand why we age and wake the world up. Why aren't we worried about this? This is not good. We treat cancer, we treat heart disease, we treat frailty, we treat Alzheimer's. But you know what causes all of those things? Aging. Why don't we care? And so I've always set that goal. And there were stages in my life where I thought I wasn't going to achieve anything. I saw that I was stuck in thought I was stuck in Australia. I just finished a PhD. There were no jobs for PhDs who were studying the sex life of a yeast cell. That's what I trained in.
That's awesome.
And I thought, what have I done? I've worked myself into such specialization. I'm not going to change the world. I might make some yeast happier, but that's about it. And being inconsequential is worse than death for me. I want to wake up every day feeling as though I'm going to make a difference.
Being inconsequential is worse than death for you. What occurred to me as you were saying it, one of the obligations, responsibilities we all have is to create a life that we want to live longer for. Right. And so for the vast majority of you listening to this, one of the things that is so important about all the things you listen to on my show, and particularly today, is how about we start creating a life that we can't wait to be around for longer in anticipation of. One of the things that makes me so excited about today's show, look, I do a lot of shows. I've been so looking forward, by the way, and it's exceeding my expectations, is because I've been in anticipation about the work you do. And I want to ask you about that from a business perspective, because we don't have that much more time, but there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this.
Yeah.
So this isn't something I know you've not been asked, but this is also a serial entrepreneur, multiple businesses, a couple I'm going to make me get involved with. But if you were an entrepreneur, knowing that if someone could have knocked on my door in 1985 and said, hey, the internet's coming, maybe you ought to start thinking about that as a businessman. This thing's coming, this wave's coming. Start to think strategically. About businesses, products, services, methods of delivery that could help there. I feel like what we're describing, this longevity industry, we'll call it that, is the next big wave. And if I were an entrepreneur listening to this, I'd be thinking, how do I prepare myself? What should I be thinking? What should I be looking at? So I know it's a difficult question, but what advice would you give to an entrepreneur who's hearing these things from you and all the possibilities that come along with it? What should they be thinking or doing?
Yeah. So the world has changed a lot in the last few years. I was the first young guy to start companies on longevity. And if people are wondering, it's all on my website. I've started more than 15 companies. I've helped dozens, and I've taken 4 public.
Awesome.
I reinvest all that money, by the way, in startups and jobs and philanthropy. So awesome. I'm not trying to make money. I'm trying to leave the world better. But if someone could have instructed me when I was young, what I would have said to them is identify a trend, and if you don't have the money to invest, get involved in startups, but work with the best people. Don't work with mediocre people, because things are going to get really hard when you start up a company. Things are going to fail, you may be near bankruptcy, and you want to be with people that you can trust. So I don't work with assholes anymore. Done with that.
That's awesome.
Really, that's the first criterion. And my friends are all like family to me, and vice versa. So that's actually one of the best bits about getting older, is you have this group of people you can trust. But from the outset, I wish that I had always worked with the best of the best. So look for that. If you have a little bit of money, you can invest in something like this. Some of these companies are just getting started, and the field is exploding.
Yes.
So I agree with you that longevity research is going to make the iPhone look like old news.
I do too. And I love what you said about trends and finding the best people. Those are two huge keys. If you're an entrepreneur thinking about this, you should be thinking about what are the trends? How does it impact the business you're in currently? Right? What are the changes going to be there? Okay, I have one last question for you because I'm just fascinated to know this. Are you afraid to die?
No.
You're not.
That's an easy question. In fact, I used to be afraid to die when I was in my 20s and 30s because I wanted to see where things would go.
Yeah.
And there's this natural fear in all of us. But I now know that I'm not afraid because I fly a lot, and a few times those planes were going down and I had felt that I was going to die. It was going to be sad that I'd miss my family would have to do without me. But personally, I'm not worried about that. My wife is the opposite. She grabs onto my arm and I'm going to die. I'm saying, if we die, we die. She's like, I don't want to die. And I'm just like, as long as it's not too painful, I'm good with it. So letting go of the fear of death was one of the best things I ever did in my life. Because now I can live without fear.
You got it.
That's the key.
That's why I ask you, David. I really believe that letting go of the fear of dying allows you to live freely now, allows you to embrace it. And I got to tell you, like, I'm more excited about life and where it's going and what the possibilities are because someone like you exists in the world. I'm like, I really admire you. And I'm glad we've become friends. You're going to stick very close